Okay, we are recording Wisdom and Wilderness. Thank you, Professor Jake. And please, my friend, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Jake.
So today we are going to pick up on what is page 24 in my book. And so it's the section called She, and it's 24 in my book, and it begins with before the encounter. So if you all want to tune into that, turn to that page if it's the same in your book.
Finish she. We finished she. We finished she.
It might not be the same page, but anyway, before the encounter.
What are we supposed to be on?
Bear.
Bear. Oh,
Yeah.
people are saying you're at Bear. Is that
Where?
not what? At Bear?
Where bear?
Bear, which is on their copy of 28, which is, I think, maybe a newer edition.
Oh, huh.
We had the fire, remember?
Okay. Bear.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah, I got
Is
you.
that good? Okay.
Thanks.
28 for us. Yeah, different page for him.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. All right. I think I might stay here by this fire all night. I can feed it, keep it burning high. But I am so tired now. Whatever time it is time to sleep. I look toward my tent and barely see it. It will take a little courage to go over there and crawl in. Courage is good. There will be no fear in the morning. And now, though I am afraid, it is time to sleep. I get up and slowly follow the beam of my flashlight into the night, away from the fire, legs stiff from long sitting, walking slowly across the campsite that has been my home this day, but now in the darkness seems alien, unmapped. It is cold. I go to the car and pull out a sweater, chuckling again about having forgotten my sleeping bag. A strange feeling, this laughter while I am afraid. It reminds me somehow of carbonation, of bubbles in water. I try to make my mind work, think of things to take care of before getting into the tent. Something in my mind doesn't care that I'm avoiding sleep as long as possible. Think about bears. Get all the food and cooking utensils away from the tent. Put them in the car, put the garbage in the car, close it up. Just a canteen of water, maybe a beer in the tent. Might a bear be thirsty? Do bears like beer? Bears are nothing to be afraid of anyway, not the ones around here. What else might be a danger in the night? Nothing I can think of, really. I suppose a snake might have crawled into the tent as the evening chill came. I'll look around in there, but nothing else. Nothing real, nothing even imagined. Sometimes you just take your chances. My mind grows philosophical as I stand in the chill by the car in the night. There's a sort of freedom when you've done what you can do and you just have to give up and let it be. It's not a matter of trust, it's simply that there's nothing else left to do. Someone said courage is fear that has said its prayers. I guess my prayers have been said, and without thinking, back there in the fire's entrancement before I saw the dark. Perhaps this thing I feel now as I stand in the night is the raw nature of courage. I realize I no longer know the difference between fear and courage. They are made of the same stuff. Maybe courage just has a little extra choice in it. Right now, my choice is very simple. Stand here all night or get into the damn tent. Kneeling on the ground, I open the tent flap and explore inside with my flashlight for snakes, bugs, whatever else might be in here. Nothing. Did I check everywhere? What are you really looking for, Jerry? Forget it. You're making yourself paranoid again. I looked back into the darkness. There are no stars, no moon, just night. The fire is almost out. I could put on another log, stay with it just a little while, but I truly am too tired. It is time. I crawl into the tent, feet first, zip up the flap, wrap my blanket around me. The ground is hard and I am already cold. It's all right. Everything is all right. Maybe I could keep my flashlight on and read for a while or write in my journal. No, I'm just looking for something more to do, and my eyes are gritty from fatigue and fire smoke. I let them close and I hear for the first time the small, vague sounds of the night. I do not know what they are, these soft whirrings and whooshings and cracklings, but they are almost comforting. I am not alone. I'm not really sure now. Perhaps I'd rather be alone. I lie awake for a long time, sleepy yet energized by fear. I realize the fear is just happening, all by itself. Nothing is scaring me. It's not that I have an idea about what might be of danger and then become afraid of it. It's the fear feeling itself that comes. And then my mind looks for something to be afraid of. Rustling leaves, the snap of a twig breaking. What is it or who? Some small creature moving, a skunk, a possum, who knows or cares? It's too still now and the tiny sounds crack the silence, make me jump, my heart beat fast. Nothing more to do, just sleep. Please God, let me sleep now because there's nothing more to do. I sleep and dream. I dream that a car drives up into my campsite, its headlights bearing down on my pup tent, closer and closer until I am awake. I'm not sure it really was a dream. I think I smell exhaust fumes. I sleep again, dreaming of sounds, snappings and whirrings, and then a growling that awakes me. And I am certain the growl has come from a close, wild presence that is just a few inches from me, just on the other side of the thin shadow canvas of the tent. I am sharp awake now and smell something right here. A brusque, wild smell, the smell of something alive and very near. I lie still, nostrils open to the smell, ears sharp into the silence, eyes keen into absolute darkness, and it growls again. The bear is right next to me, its side brushing the tent canvas, its growl deep, resonant, slow. This is no dream, and I am terrified, and yet I feel a strange calmness over everything, so difficult to describe. It's like some kind of fierce embrace. I lie absolutely still, staring wide-eyed at nothing. My mind appears, thinking fast. What do you do to get rid of a bear? I heard somewhere you bang pots and pans together. Okay, do I have any pots and pans? No, dummy, you put them in the car with the food so they wouldn't attract bears. Okay. So there's nothing to do. Still nothing to do. Still nothing. Lie here, still, be scared, nothing more to do. And here maybe another deeper voice, just a hint of a touch of the power of the slowing, whispering, be frightened. Just be frightened. The bear paws at something, ambles toward the picnic table, comes back once around the other side of the tent, and leaves, just like that. A patrol through my campsite with no wasted motion. No more growls, nothing. My back and legs hurt from the cold, hard ground and from keeping still. My heart is beating so loudly, I'm sure the bear must hear it. And I have never felt so alive. I lie unmoving for a very long time after the bear leaves. My senses completely alert. No thoughts, no images, seeing nothing, hearing only my heart and breath and the sounds of the night. For the first time in my life, I am experiencing pure fear. I am completely present in a place beyond all coping because there is nothing to do. I have never before experienced such clean, unadulterated purity of emotion. The sphere is naked. It consists in these slowly passing moments of my heart pounding, my breath rushing yet fully silent, my body ready for anything, my mind absolutely empty, open, waiting. I am fear. It is beautiful. It's a very different take on fear than, is socially acceptable. I am fear. It is beautiful. I once lived in a tent for about 5 months on Cortez Island, which is off the coast of British Columbia, going up towards Alaska, as I was creating an organic garden for this family. And Cortez Island has about 900 cougars, which is almost as much as people that live there. By cougars, I'm not talking about older women who hunt young men. I mean exactly the cougars, the actual cougars. People always. And one night I was in my tent, and I always had the mesh open so I could look at the stars. And I watched a cougar come in from out of the forest, because the place that I lived on was connected to a big forest, and walk across the whole yard, which wasn't that close to me. So I wasn't really thinking it was going to come over by me, but it was about maybe, I don't know, 30 yards away, 25, 30 yards, and just kind of cruise through the whole yard, go in back of the little house where my friends were sleeping, and then come back out the front, and then enter into the forest on the other side. It was pretty amazing. We always knew they were there, but that was the only time in the 2 years that I spent on that small island that I actually ever saw one. But has anybody ever been in the wild and seen a pretty big wild animal that made you experience a kind of fear like this guy did?
I see heads nodding. Jenna, would you like to comment?
I was sleeping in the car with my daughters, our daughters, and the guys were 2 sons and my husband were in the tent. And all of a sudden I woke up to kind of a funny noise, and I looked down at the picnic table, and Bob was leaning over the table in a kind of a funny way. And I looked again and I thought, that's not Bob, that's a bear. So we all sort of froze for, I don't know, 20 minutes maybe, till the bear decided he was bored and didn't find anything to eat. And away he went.
So you had a bear experience too.
I had a similar experience in Yellowstone. I decided to take a nap in my car until I woke up to the sound of a bear rummaging through the garbage. And I think he was going to head to my car next, come rip the top off. So, anyone else?
Did you,
Oops.
I just read a story, and it wasn't a story, it was a news article about a family up in Tahoe who were renting this cabin and found in the spring a mother bear and 4 cubs had been hibernating underneath. And they called wildlife or something, and they came, and Mama Bear ambled out, and they waited, and pretty soon all the little bears came along, and it was just fine. They just went off into the wild.
Well, for those of you who were part of the Travels with Charlie class, if you remember, Steinbeck brings Charlie into Yellowstone, and Charlie becomes a totally different dog and kind of goes nuts, right? And then Steinbeck's like, I never saw him like that, right? And then Charlie's like all tired out, and at night he's dreaming and his legs are moving. Steinbeck thinks he's chasing the bears. It's a beautiful part of the book because he really sees Charlie in a whole different light. But yeah, bears, it's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting to be in the presence of a very large wild animal that's actually wild and not in a cage or in a zoo somewhere. So this
We've got-
next,
Sorry,
go ahead.
we got two more.
Yeah, cool.
I've got Lake Tahoe. My brother has a cabin up there, and they have 2 dogs. And one early morning, like 7 o'clock, I decided to take the dog for a walk while everybody was still sleeping. So I walked around, we're going about 2 miles from the lake. But anyway, I walked the dog, and all of a sudden I saw across the road in the neighborhood, a bear came across and looked at me, and I hold the dog, 2 dogs, and they're on the leash. They both stood still. The dog did not bark at all. They just kind of stood still. And here soon, 2 little cubs coming, following Mama. And the mama bear was looking at me and looking at the bear, and it went into the wilderness. They look for food, around the houses, the cabins. But anyway, I stood there with the dog. The dog stood with me about 15 minutes. I made sure it went to the forest, highway, no bears. And then when I got back to the cabin, it says, you don't walk that early in the morning. By 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, you're safe. But not that early in the morning, because a lot of bears are out scrounging for food.
It's probably good that the dogs didn't bark.
Yeah.
Okay, one more for Patty.
Well, this is a really tough one. We were going through Yellowstone with another relative of ours, and I was in the back seat with the boys. And as you know, when you drive through, the first thing they tell you is do not roll down your windows. Well, my youngest son is one, if you tell him don't do it, doesn't do it. And all of a sudden, somebody said, there's a bear, and he was at our window, and Gary had rolled out in that window down. And an old car, you don't just automatically push a button. And it took me a few minutes to get out of my scare, to get over by the window, to roll the window up, and his nose was already inside the window. So, remember the bear story, sir.
We lived in Florida, me and my wife, for several different periods of our marriage together. And there's always stories, because we lived and taught in Orlando. And there's always stories of tourists who come down, they stay at hotels, and the hotels are usually on lakes, because Orlando has tons of lakes. It's something most people don't know, but it's just dotted with lakes. And they always bring their dogs down and they walk along the edge of the water. And you always hear about some Pomeranian or some little, Shih Tzu, an alligator just comes and snatches it and brings it into the water, And all the time, like the tourists are like, but I would always tell my wife, because she's from Oregon and I had lived in Florida prior to meeting her and then going to live there. Don't ever walk along the edges of the lakes or a pond or anything, because alligators can really literally be anywhere, even in like little swales in front of people's house. As long as there's any kind of water, an alligator can be there. So. But always little dogs, would always disappear along the lakeside. So this next section is called purity. Once I saw a deer like that, a deer made of pure fear. I was sitting on a rock in the woods when I heard crashing, crushing sounds coming toward me. A group of 5 or 6 deer was running before 2 wild dogs. As the deer approached, they veered off to their left, away from me, but one, smaller than the others and lagging behind them, kept straight toward me. It was nearly upon me when it froze, catching my scent, I presume, and was for a moment motionless. In that instant, the little deer was nothing but complete, perfect deer fear. It simply was terror, eyes wide, round white, mouth gaping, drooling, nostrils wide, steaming, muscles shimmering in sweated fur. It looked left and right, not, I think, deciding where to go, but simply nakedly seeing with complete absence of intent. And then it ran, crashing through the brush after its mates. The dogs came then, silent, smooth, silky, deadly, disappearing over the wooded hillside after their prey. In the tent that night, lying still as a dead man while the bear brushed next to me, I was fear like that deer, so pure, perfection. How can I describe my sense of the privilege of feeling so impeccably afraid and my supreme gratitude for it? After the bear left, I rolled slowly onto my stomach, found my flashlight, opened the tent flap, and sent the light beam across the campsite to the surrounding trees. Nothing there. Wobbly and breathless all at once, I crawled out of the tent and stood, took a few unsteady steps to where I could lean against a tree, unbutton my fly. When I had finished, I looked up, and there, beyond the branches, completely unexpected, were hundreds of thousands of stars. A night brilliance so overwhelming, I fell back against the tree, grasping for it, not to keep from falling, but to stay on earth. Thank you, God, I whispered into the radiant night. You know, it's interesting. I mean, I have read this book before, and it's interesting that pure anything brings us into presence. You know, people always think, oh, pure peace, that would be, you know, nice, or pure love. And those things do bring you into presence, but also things that we think of usually as being negative, when they're experienced purely, they move beyond their negativity or their positivity, and they just become what is actually happening. And that's kind of what he's talking about here, is that beyond our judgment of fear, fear is something that, you know, we are capable of feeling anywhere from judgmental to purity. And in the moment of purity of anything, we move into the present, and everything becomes so much more, you know, naked. And that's what he's kind of describing, the naked present. And he's actually thanking God for being allowed to be in that place. Gratitude. I am not completely certain what I was saying thank you for. It wasn't just for the star beauty, nor for surviving the bear experience. It seemed to be for the privilege of being alive in the totality of everything. The gift of fully existing right then and there. Fear, like any other strong emotion, can make you exquisitely conscious of living, perfectly aware of being in the moment. It can only do that, however, on those rare occasions when you don't try to fight it, run away from it, cope with it, suppress it, tame it, or otherwise domesticate it. The real gift of that night was that I had been unable to do anything about my fear of the bear. Laying there in the tent, I could not run away. I could not make the bear go away. I could not reassure myself that things were going to be all right. I could not trick my mind into thinking about something else. There was nothing to be done. And that was the gift. I could only be there in the real situation, being real, being pure fear. That is why I think that after the bear left, as I grabbed that sweet tree under the stars, I became pure gratitude. That lesson has served me well over the years. There have been so many times now that I could have tried to fight my fear, but instead have somehow been empowered just to be in it. I am also humbled by how much of my previous life I had spent trying to tame fear and other emotions, keeping them under control, civilizing them. I knew no better, but I still grieve a little over how much of my life energy I stifled in that process. In my psychiatric practice, how many times did I help patients cope with their feelings, tame the power of their emotions? I no longer believe that was helpful. Even when I assisted people in uncovering long-buried emotions, I seldom encouraged them to savor the life juice of the feelings themselves, the rich, dark, love nature of grief, the warming fire of anger, the subtle luminosity of loneliness, the pure gut-driving power of sexual desire, or the exquisite clarity of fear. Instead, for the most part, I helped them cope. I have come to hate that word, because to cope with something, you have to separate yourself from it. You make it your antagonist, your enemy. Like management, coping is a taming word, sometimes even a warfare word. Wild, untamed emotions are full of life spirit, vibrant with the energy of being. They don't have to be acted out, but neither do they need to be tamed. They are part of our inner wilderness. They can just be what they are. God save me from coping. God help me join and not separate. Help me be with and in, not apart from. Show me the way to savoring, not controlling. Dear God, hear my prayer. Make me forever copeless. You know, I mean, that's powerful, right? Because of course, as we read back in the preface, he's sick when he's writing this, and he knows that he's moving towards his death. And throughout most of his life, he was a psychologist, and later in his life, he became a contemplative with the Shalom Institute, mostly through these interactions, you know, with nature that brought him to this deeper part of himself. And so it's interesting that he went from psychiatry to being a contemplative, and in that process, he moved away from coping towards being. And he even looks back now on his time as a psychiatrist, and he says, you know, for the most part, I helped them cope. I have come to hate that word, because to cope with something, you have to separate yourself from it. And this is kind of the lesson he learned that night with the bear, with the fear. It seems like it was the first time in his life that he didn't separate himself from something like fear. And so he felt it purely. And this moved him into a more contemplative state of being, which enters into the present moment. Cold. A couple of years later, I received another teaching, one that finally, I believe, made me get the point about fear and the folly of trying to control nature. It was February, the first time I had gone to the mountain in winter. I had been out alone many times by then, but never in the winter. I had very little cold weather gear and no experience. So the weekend before I left, I set up my tent in the snow of my backyard for practice. I waited until late in the day so as not to be conspicuous, but still my neighbor walked over through the snow. Gotta love your nosy neighbors. What you doing? I'm going camping next weekend, and I've never been out in this kind of weather before, so I figure I need a little practice. I smiled. I had pretty much rehearsed it. Gonna sleep out here tonight? Blank face. Yeah, I smiled again. Well, hope you don't freeze. A smile back, finally. I learned a lot that night. I learned how important it is to stay dry, to keep snow out of the tent, and wear only enough clothing to keep warm. Sweat is no friend in cold weather. It stays on you and freezes. Equipment works differently too. The freshest flashlight batteries seem half used up. Matches don't want to light. Plastic becomes brittle. My family had given me a tiny single burner gas stove for Christmas. In the cold, it had to be preheated before it would start. I learned how to do that, and I made a cup of tea in the snow in my backyard. The water took a long time to boil. I didn't have a cold weather sleeping bag, just a couple of old thin ones, so I put one of them inside the other. It was an exhausting operation to get inside them, to zip them up, and finally to find comfort while hardly being able to move. I guess he could have just bought a warm weather sleeping bag. I learned to take care of absolutely everything before I crawled into the bags. It's not a procedure to keep repeating. Once I was in and settled, my feet were freezing. How could my toes be aching from cold when I was inside 2 sleeping bags, fully dressed and wearing long underwear and 3 pairs of socks? Somehow I sensed my toes were not only cold, but numb. The extra socks were too tight, cutting off the circulation. Like Houdini in a straitjacket, I managed to remove 2 of the 3 pairs of socks without getting out of the sleeping bags, and warmth came. With a wool hat on my head, snuggled in, aware for the first time that snowflakes do make little sounds, I finally slept. Some hours later, I learned another lesson. This is always my least favorite part too, is having to pee after you're sleeping in a sleeping bag. Having to extricate myself from the sleeping bags, I resolved never again to drink tea just before going to bed. The following weekend, as I packed the car, I felt calm, sufficiently prepared. No lists. Instead, I just moved slowly, trying to be open to what I might need. The only conscious plan I had, and I have no idea where it came from, was to cook a monster breakfast the first morning, a breakfast that might well last the whole weekend, a breakfast unforgettable, a breakfast that would move galaxies by its very existence. On my way, I stopped at the grocery store and bought a dozen eggs, a pound of sausage, and corresponding quantities of potatoes, onions, green peppers, mushrooms, cheese, and bread. I do believe he said he only had a little 1-burner stove. As I drove into the mountains, the sky was overcast and sleet was falling. An ice storm had struck the forest the night before, and hundreds of trees lay broken by the wind force and ice weight. Here and there, sunlight found its way through the gray clouds and everything glistened. The roadways to the campsite were slick and dangerous, and the ranger had given me an alternative route, a longer one he thought might be a little safer along the mountainside. I was in a 4-wheel drive the whole time, but I still skidded, slid, and spun my wheels. I had to get out and pull 2 heavy, broken branches off the trail into the site. And the only place I could park was up against some ice-bent bushes and low trees that scraped the side of the car. I had been so focused on the driving, so intent on staying on the road, that I missed the precious sense of welcoming I had come to love so much. I felt a little sad when I finally stepped out into the snow, realizing that all the way through the forest, I had been coping with the ice, pitting myself against it, tightly controlling the car upon it. As dangerous as the ice was, I could not bear to begin my weekend with such a tense sense of antagonism, such single-minded lack of appreciation for my surroundings. It was still early, the wind easing into fitful breezes, the sun shining more steadily, the ice-glazed forest bursting with radiance where the light touched it. I felt the familiar relaxation of my shoulders, my breath gentling like the breeze. Slowly, I got back into the car. Without really thinking the thoughts, I was going to drive those icy roads just a little more, drive them this time with friendliness and simple respect, and move along them as sweetly as I possibly could. I backed the car out of the campsite and drove perhaps a mile along the mountainside, then turned around and came back. I drove with great attention, but now it was appreciation instead of antipathy. I drove carefully, but with a sense of participation rather than control. I felt vitally present, but there was no tension in me. And instead of concentrating exclusively on the driving, my awareness was open. I sensed not only the turns and slants of the road and the traction of the wheels on the ice, but also the forest around me and the sky above, the misty coldness of the air, the crystalline perfection of trees, both fallen and still standing, The simple centered presence of my body, the way my hands held the steering wheel almost tenderly. Trees, still whole after the storm, softly shone in ice coating. The broken edges of fallen trees radiated sparkles, their fractures fracturing the light. I returned to the campsite in a completely different frame of mind. As I again maneuvered the car up against the icy bush branches, I felt ready to accept the power of the slowing wherever she chose to come. And she was right there, seeming to guide me and walking on the icy snow in the same centered, open way I had driven the car, moving with my center of gravity always over my feet, never letting my feet or my head move much forward of my belly, like a dance, a soft, confident choreography, fully open, conscious, present, and part of everything around me. I set up camp gradually, smoothly, with no wasted motion. I put my tent about 10 feet from the car near a stream that continued to flow through the cold, icing itself into steadily narrowing channels, birthing fresh waterfalls over its own frozen substance. The sky was overcast again, and I could not see the sun setting. The winter darkness came suddenly. I tried to start a fire, but all the available wood was covered with ice. Only fresh clusters of fallen pine branches, broken from their mother trees by ice and wind, would catch the flames. The frozen pitch within them melted, sizzled, caught, and flared, and then was gone. It was not the kind of fire that could give comfort or cook a meal. It only offered sputtering hints of warmth. I was not hungry anyway, and I knew I was going to have a monster breakfast in the morning. The forecast was for clearing skies and temperatures below 10 degrees, so in the darkness I prepared to preserve my body warmth in the tent. In the layers of clothing, now wisely loose-fitting, a wool hat on my head, and an insulating mat under me, I crawled into my doubled sleeping bag. The old zippers on the bags resisted, catching on folds of cloth, jamming as my numbing fingers tried to work them. But finally I was in, and warm enough, and I lay in the complete dark of a still early evening, full of energy and not at all sleepy, with nothing to do. You know, that's interesting. It's probably right, maybe like what, 5, 6 p.m. He's not tired. He gets into the sleeping bag, and that could be its own kind of, lesson to work out in itself, having all this energy, not wanting to sleep, but of course it being well too cold for him to go out again. Sounds. I am laying on my back, eyes open in the cold, seeing nothing. I hear the stream clopping and slapping against its icy walls and chips of ice falling from trees when a spurt of night breeze bends them. But there is nothing else. Thoughts come and go, but I cannot follow them. The power of the slowing always stills my capacity to track thoughts to a conclusion. They simply appear, hover for a while like butterflies, and then disappear. One of the thoughts hazily drifting through my awareness now is that I'm not afraid. No crazy person, no bear, nothing in its right mind would move about on a night like this. I am all alone, water and ice sounds, no fear. Faces come, images, people I know, people I don't know. I don't think about them, can't. Is this a prayer now arising? My mind tries to take it and make it something. My image of me praying, but I'm stilled again. If it's prayer, it just is. Prayer may be happening, but there is nothing for me to do. Images of home, of friends, of memories, things from the past come, and I sense them, experience them right now, here and now. I am warm inside. I wish I could stretch, move around, but warm is good. Still not sleepy, just lying here. Am I bored? I don't know the difference between being bored and just being. I can't even wonder about it much. I smile. My mind still wants to figure things out. Still feels it has to be up to something, but it just can't do it. Settle down, mind, my sweet, good working, diligent mind. Rest a while. It's okay, really. The stream sounds are very loud now. Suddenly a cacophony. I wish I'd camped farther away. Settle down, little stream, you're deafening me. Settle down, mind. Mind stream, building ice thoughts, flowing relentlessly, the nature of water, the nature of mind. It's getting very Buddhistic right here. Slow sleep finally comes. Dream images no different from wakeful ones. Stream sounds in the background, people talking. I'm really dreaming now. People talking, or are they playing a radio? Men and women talking, real voices. I awake, startled, tense, listening. Yes, they are voices, talking. God, who's out here in this cold night? What are they up to? Straight jacketed in the sleeping bags, I am tense as a twisted rope. They are voices for sure, talking to one another, yet I can't make out a single word. What is this? My God, what's happening? Am I nuts? I focus in, hone my hearing right tight on the voice sounds. What are they? Now I know they're in the stream sounds, voice sounds in the stream. Women and men talking, calmly, businesslike, in the stream. My fear eases. I realize I've been holding my breath, straining to hear. As I relax, the voices are not so clear. They fade in and out of the stream sounds. If you've ever read any Icelandic lore, they believe a lot in like fairies and gnomes and pixies and all sorts of things because they have this huge interior land outside of Reykjavik that you can drive through for like, literally I drove through it for a couple hours one time. I didn't see another car, another human being, even another living thing. And people say that when they go out there, you know, you can hear voices in the wind, in the water, and in the waterfalls and stuff like that. They call them sprites too. But it's just, you know, it's kind of the mind. And this is kind of what he's delving into here. Something tells me this is a hallucination, and something else tells me it is absolutely real. My mind, to make something of it, wonders if these are spirit voices of ancient ones who died along these waters long ago. I hone my attention on them again, very directly, and I hear distinct words that seem to be made of English vowels and consonants, but not words I've ever heard before. Do I sense a little irritation in them now, as if they resent my eavesdropping? Oh, come on, Jerry. But it seems so real. I relax again, breathe, and the voices merge with water dropping, spilling, burbling on rocks and ice. As sleep comes again, the voices wax and wane in tides and eddies and half dreaming. I seem to see the faces of those who talk in the water, faces I've never seen before, but normal faces, women and men just talking, conversing calmly in the icy night in words I am not meant to understand. A time of stillness, of depth, of sleep, and then another set of sounds. Once again, I awaken, every sense sharper than I had ever thought possible. This time, I am clear awake. No dazing fantasies possible, and someone or something is moving outside. I hear the crunch of footfalls breaking through the snow crust. I hear right now a scraping of those icy bushes over there against the side of my car. Whatever it is, it's moving next to the car, up one side, down the other. I can see the bushes in my memory. They grow high, touching the sides of the car up along the windows. This must be something tall. This has to be a person. I have never been so terrified. Not in Vietnam, not anywhere. I thought I was helpless when the bear came, but it was nothing like this. I am lying completely vulnerable, unable to extricate myself from this prison of double-zipped sleeping bags. My fingers twitch feebly at my sides. There is nowhere to go, nothing to do, nothing to see, nothing even to smell, only hear the sounds and wait and be afraid, be fear. Stretching with all senses towards the place of the sounds, I am amazed to hear whispered words coming from my own mouth. Thank you, God. Oh God, I thank you. Now, a fraction of a second after the whispered words, I am flooded by an immense feeling of gratitude. I am filled with it. I begin to move, slowly turning onto my stomach in the mass of fabric, not caring about the sounds my movements make, my knees drawing up beneath me, the sleeping bag tight against my back, my forearms on the ground. I could get out from this position. No need to unzip the bags. I could leap out if I needed to. For what? Why, for sheer gratitude. The thankfulness feeling is overwhelming, so strong I cannot tell it from love. What is this? Terror, life, thanksgiving, love power? My heart is thrashing from fear inside my chest, breath full, deep, clean, senses pure, vital. Do I really feel what this seems to be? My blood flowing in every artery, vein, and capillary, and each cell of me shining with life? And oh, this mind, this awareness, nothing inside but the clear radiance of living. God, I am so grateful, so overcome with thanksgiving for sheer being. Oh, wonderful beauty, love, fear, living being. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. I could die now, for I know what life is. No longer am I listening for outside sounds. I am only sensing my own terror existence, the indescribable beauty, the giftedness, the sheer privilege. Oh, my divine love, never again reassure me. I do not want to know everything will be all right. I never want to be secure again as long as I live. Give me no safety. Only give me the livingness forever, this power of being, though I know I will die of it, of love exploding. The feeling passes. No sound remains but the stream in my heart. My hand pats around the tent and finds the flashlight. I unzip the flap and shine the cold, dulled beam toward the car, around the humble frozen fire ashes over the stream. Nothing. I know now, dimly like the flashlight's beam, that although what makes me afraid might be deadly, the fear itself is wonderful. Fear is life energy, full-bodied, rich, clean, exquisite, sweet. Sounds like a chocolate mousse, too. When you get right down to its bones, fear is love. Fear is made of love. That's why perfect love, love in its purest form, casts out fear. I switch the flashlight off and roll over on my back, halfway out of the sleeping bags, my head sticking out of the tent flap, wool cap on the crusted snow, and there, once again, are the stars. The stars must have knocked me out, for now it is morning, and I am awakening, gently, back in the tent, snugly warm in the sleeping bags, unable to remember how I got here. The outer fabric of my sleeping bag and the whole inside of the tent are covered with a thin layer of ice, condensation from my breath. My life breath has frozen itself all around me as I slept. I crawl outside quickly and stand and stretch in crystalline air. The sky sheer blue, empty of clouds like my morning mind, empty of everything. I immediately walk to the car and look for tracks, but there are too many, most of them mine, I'm sure, and I cannot tell one from another. I have no idea who or what made the footfall sounds in the night, so be it. Kneeling by the fire pit, my mind in perfect morning emptiness, I shake the brittle ice from the pine branches I tried to light last night. They light quickly and burn well now, and I inhale their sweet aroma. I boil water, make coffee, And with the mug in my hand and the third or fourth swallow in my stomach, my mind finally wakes up. It's time for breakfast, the monster breakfast. Ah, yes, my single plan, my one agenda. Like a slave to my thoughts, my body gets up to collect what I need for breakfast. I set my coffee mug on a stone near the fire and take one step toward the car, and I am suddenly overcome with fatigue, and the slowing presence arises wordlessly in me in a place much deeper than my mind, and it is telling me, no, it is not yet time for breakfast. Not at all. I almost feel gentle hands taking me by the shoulders, setting me back down by the fire. My body relaxes, my mind quiets. I sit, I look at the fire, I look at the morning mountainside, I close my eyes. There is no sound but the stream and the pine sap popping in flames. I watch the fire and I know time passes, much time. Now and then thoughts of breakfast arise briefly and are stilled by the deeper sense. Not now, not yet. I just sit. All right. We'll leave it off there and we'll start next time with guidance and teaching. That was a very deeply entertaining, I feel, section of the book, but so much of the book is. And we'll see next time if he does make his monster breakfast.
Yeah, we had a lot of laughter from the room. Anybody have any final questions or comments? I hear the word wonderful, so.
All right. Well, it's always a pleasure to be with you, even though it's through Zoom. I still feel your presence out there. So enjoy your week, and I look forward to being with you again next Tuesday.
Okay, thanks a lot, Professor. We'll see you next Tuesday.
All right.